Well, I just canceled my Big Bad Toy Store pre-orders for all Valaverse figures. And now a review. What's up, Internet? Jay here with Nerd Rage Against the Machine. Today, we're going to talk about the Valaverse Action Force line and really kind of compare it and contrast it to its number one competitor, which is the G.I. Joe Classified line by Hasbro. So, first off, let me just say this. I like the line. I really like what I've seen so far. I've been able to get a small smattering of figures, and basically that's really why I've waited until now to do this review, because I didn't have every figure in the line, and I knew I wasn't going to get it, which is kind of part of my biggest issue with the line, and I'll explain that as we go on. Um, First, I'd like to kind of go over the things that really are the big things about them, the things that are the improvements, or the things that they talk about most when it comes to comparing them to Classified, as Classified is their number one competitor. So the first thing is, of course, the amount of hands that you get. You do get a bunch of hand options, which are really cool with the Valaverse figures. Um, Out of all the Classified figures I've owned, I think only Cobra Commander has alternate hands, and even then it's just like a gripping up and a pointing hand versus the two that grip his weapons. Whereas these guys have a ton of them. In fact, using this guy here, one of these Delta Troopers as a driver in the 3D printed Vamp, using the cradle hand actually has been beautiful because it doesn't damage the steering wheel when he's looks like he's trying to actually drive the vehicle. The second big thing that's been mentioned, of course, is the stands. The way better than no stand, of course, which is what comes with Classified stands that have 4 points on them for actually plugging the figure in, as well as a notch back here so that you can put the file card behind them for display purposes. Yeah, it's cool. I like the stands. However, my my two Delta Troopers here have the toughest time in the world getting onto these stands. The newer figures are better. The two, my Scarab and my Rollout both fit the stands perfectly. Unlike these figures here, the Delta Troopers. The other things I would bring up, of course, is they talked about pinless construction, not seeing the pin marks that you do see on the GI Joes, and that is true. As well as I would even argue more realistic weapons and more realistic looking and better detailed weapons. A lot has been made of the GI Joe Classified figures having what are effectively Nerf guns, versus this looks like a variation of the AR-15. They are very realistic and well sculpted. Now, sculpt quality I would say is on par. I don't think that the Valaverse figures are superior sculpts to the Hasbro stuff, but certainly not inferior either. I mean, I would say they're on par. Now, going over the many things that Valaverse has both crowed about, and also that are, the things that set them apart: the pinless construction, the more militant look, the stands, the extra hands. Yeah, they are a lot of amenities, but I don't think any of those, in all honesty, none of those are a particular deal breaker. Like, I'm not going to throw all my Classifieds away over their lack of stands, their lack of external hands, or even seeing pins on Duke's arm, in all honesty. Now, the other thing, of course, is the premium price. The average G.I. Joe figure is $22. The average Action Force figure is $32, unless you get the troop builders like the Delta Trooper here, which do not normally come with guns. These are actually spare Snake Eyes guns I've got them holding at the moment, but just the hands and the stands. Now, that price, I will agree, is justified, mostly for two reasons. One, yes, those amenities, even though I don't think that they're necessary to make the figure perfect or better, they are amenities regardless. And also the fact that this is a small company. I get paying a premium price for figures that that are just smaller batches, that there's a smaller profit margin to be made than Hasbro with their multiple millions of figures. Then, of course, so saying all that, those are the things I really like about Action Force, and yes, I do agree that I think they are worth the money. I don't think that the current asking price for them is completely out of the realm of logic, considering what you get out of them. Now let me hit you with some of the bads, and there are some. Number one, and I know everyone's talked about this, and I've heard defenses on it 100 times over, but the need to heat the figures. This one is an oddball one, and I say that because I have, so thankfully I've had no real breaks. In fact, the only breaks I've had in my G.I. Joe Classifieds or my Action Forces have been both my Scarab Trooper and my Rollout have had accessories basically fall off where they would have been glued. So like his holster here on Rollout, this actually popped off, but a little CA glue fixed that. Same with the knife sheath on the back of the Scarab. That I'm not counting. I'm not worried about it. It's microscopic, and again, the glue didn't hold. When I did get my first two troop builders, my True Delta Troopers, they were like statues. Like there was no way around it. I had to put them in either through a heat gun or hot water. I used the hot water technique for about 5 minutes, and they did come out fine, and they haven't needed it since. They are perfectly posable. In fact, I would even argue I really like the rocker on them a lot. It puts them in some great dynamic poses. So they are, for that respect, very cool. However, I did not need to ever heat gun or warm water any of my classifieds. The two deluxe figures, or the newer figures I got, which were Rollout and Scarabs, they did require it, but there was a better movement. And that may have also been the fact that these guys I was handed immediately, and the Scarab and Rollout actually sat while I was out and about. My wife picked them up and had them sitting on the counter for me, so they at least had a couple hours to warm up in the house, whereas these guys were cold when I got them. But no, I didn't have to ever heat up Duke or Flint or any of those figures. And of course, in not having to heat them up, none of them have broken. I have not had a break. Again, I might have had similar situation where like a piece that should be glued on, the glue would miss it heat, and therefore I had to re-glue it. But nothing as severe as, say, a broken leg or a broken arm. None of them. None of my G.I. Joes have had that happen. Knock on wood. And what's more, these are NECA's original superheroes, the Phantom and Flash Gordon. I didn't have to heat these guys up either. And nor have they broken. Actually, that's a technical lie. The sword for Flash did break. But as far as the figures themselves, though, they have been perfectly movable and perfectly posable. And came with the muzzle flashes, which was really cool. And it makes me wonder, is NECA improving? It's something I was thinking about doing a video on, but I really kind of wanted to focus on the Action Force thing at the moment. So the big thing right now is the Action Forces are good. And I do think they're a valid figure line. I think they're great. I would give them a 4 out of 5 easily, which is about what I would give G.I. Joe Classified. Are there things I would fix? Sure. Are there things that I think are unfixable or worthless about them? Not really. But I feel that way with the Classifieds as well. But this leads me to my real problem, and the reason that, as I said in my opening, I ended up canceling all my Big Bad Toy Store pre-orders. It's because of the fact that, as much as I do enjoy the line Action Force, I feel like it's hard to collect, hard to get, for one. The small batches have made it so that it's so boutique that it's just not feasible to get them. I had heard about this line from multiple sources originally, and honestly, I'm not a guy who jumps on something like this. I'm not going to go out and be the guy who buys say a PS5 in every game that's out for it, day one, just to prove I've done so. I tend to be pretty conservative. I missed the Kickstarter, so I jumped on to Big Bad Toy Store, which had a pre-order. Cool. I bought 4 figures, specifically Condor, Steel Brigade, Condor, Steel Brigade, a Urban Trooper, and the Swarm Trooper, as well as a backpack set and a gun set, Bravo, I believe. So that's what I had on pre-order. And because of the way pre-orders work, I always hate not having the money and being caught with my pants down, financially speaking. So I went and bought some pre-ordered cards, some prepaid cards. And I paid for each of those figures and was thinking about getting Karak and maybe Bone Collector. Those are 2 that looked really cool to me as well. But I wanted to see how that first batch came out before I started, going hog wild into them. So today I went and checked the balances on my card, which I hadn't done before, and with Big Bad Toy Store taking forever thanks to the shipping issue that they've been dealing with, and I found that one of the cards that I'd prepaid had already been taking off inactivity fees to the tune of $25. So basically the cost of my Urban Trooper was already absorbed in waiting. I find that annoying. I find that frustrating, and I realize that that's not the fault of Bobby Vala, it's not the fault of Valaverse, it's not the fault of Big Bad Toy Store, it's the fault of the bank and the card that I chose. But it was enough to really just set me on edge. Because here's the thing, guys. These figures are not getting reproduced from what I understand. And if I am wrong, please correct me if I am wrong there. I would like to get those figures. I would still like to consider getting a Karak and a Bone Collector. But at the moment, if they're not going to get reissued in any way, shape, form, or notion, I'm not chasing them down. And that to me is going to be the biggest detriment to this line. In the line of, especially when you figure that these are figures that don't have the history that G.I. Joe has. I mean, look, I'm not saying the Swarm Trooper is a terrible figure. It's an awesome figure, but I was 8 or so when I got my first Cobra officer, and he was so awesome. And so when I got the line, of course, I had to get a Cobra officer, because heck, Cobra, right? And I've watched all the cartoons, I've read a bunch of the comic books, I've seen the movies, even the terrible ones. G.I. Joe has nostalgia, which is something that Action Force doesn't. And to that end, when I looked online and decided to take a look, so as an experiment, I'm still missing Firefly from my Classifieds collection. He's one I'd love to get my hands on, but haven't yet. So I went to eBay, and a Firefly is going for about $35, which is steep when you consider, but not insane. Looking at Valaverse Action Force figures, for the most part, other than a few exceptions, I couldn't find a figure under $70, honestly. And the ones that were slightly under that were things like the Swarm Trooper, which is still currently available on Valaverse's website. So it's like, yeah, I'm not spending $55 at eBay when I could just go get it for $32 at Valaverse.com. Not going to happen. Now, I know that there's a little checkbox when you go and purchase these figures that says, I promise I won't scalp. But as you can see, that works. If you go check out eBay for yourself and see how well that works. These figures are getting scalped because there's demand for it. Supply and demand. The only thing that's going to change supply and demand is a greater supply. And I get it. He doesn't, that Bobby Vala and therefore Valaverse Inc. doesn't want to get stuck with a bunch of unsold Condors or a bunch of unsold Delta Troopers. Yeah, I get it. But I think when you see the writing on the wall like this, it's time to at least consider some sort of, maybe put a reprint figure in each wave, or 2 reprint figures in each wave. Wave 4 comes out. Yeah, it comes out, but it also comes out with Condor and Steel Brigade. Or, Wave 5 has Karak and a Swarm Trooper. Whatever that looks like. Because ultimately, here's the thing. As nice as these figures are, and I will continue to buy them, and I didn't know until recently that if you pre-order from Valaverse, they just take your money and you're good to go and just wait on it, which is what I did with Desert Rat. I do have a Desert Rat coming from 3B, and I'm looking at Trigger, and I'm looking at Trigger Man and a few others. I'm not going to say I'm not going to collect this line, but what I am going to say is that I'm greatly disappointed by the ability to get the figures that I want out of it now. And that's just, that window is shrinking more and more each day, it felt like. So I think if there's one thing that would improve this line right now, it would be that. Increase availability. Improve availability. And, I felt frustrated when I saw there was a customization contest on the 3POA site when I couldn't even get the figures at that point. I mean, I think I'd just gotten these guys when that happened. It's like, oh, you have 10 minutes. Now, and I realize, the argument is going to be there for, well, you should have been more on the ball. You should have your finances better in order. You should, it's easy to put blame on one side or the other. And that's not my point. I've heard these things before. And again, it's one of those things where it's really wonderful to say. It's the equivalent of, well, if you work harder, you'll make more money. Not necessarily true. You can't tell me that Jeff Bezos is the hardest working man on the planet. And yet, he is the wealthiest, or one of them anyway. But that all aside, like I said, the line, I'm going to give it a solid 4 out of 5. There's some great figures here. And there's potential for it to become an even bigger line and more impressive. I'm rooting for it. At the same time, if I can't get the figures, there is that point where no matter how great your line is, it doesn't matter. There's that cutoff point, and I think that's something that needs to be addressed sooner rather than later. And I'm sorry I've been a bummer on this video, guys, but that's kind of where I feel at this point. So anyway, for those of you who have been able to get them and enjoy them, what are your thoughts on them? Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? That's really what the comment section is for. Let's keep it civil, of course, but I love to hear all opinions on these figures. And in the meantime, I bid you adieu and happy collecting.